The Story of Ernő Rubik, a Legacy of Resilience. In a small Budapest home, amidst a Europe torn apart by war, a child named Ernő Rubik was born in 1944. His world was not one of luxury or abundance. On the contrary, he grew up surrounded by austerity, discipline, and the scars of a country marked by post-war struggle. Yet, in this environment of uncertainty, a spark glowed that would never be extinguished. The capacity to imagine, to create, and to see possibilities where others only saw limitations. From a young age, Ernő discovered the power of curiosity. His father, an aeronautical engineer, showed him the rigor of precision and the importance of constant effort. His mother, a poet and writer, gifted him the sensitivity to appreciate beauty and creativity. In this fusion of science and art, the young Rubik learned that life is a puzzle built piece by piece, move by move. Unbeknownst to him, the shy child who played with geometric shapes was laying the groundwork for one of the most influential creations in modern history. Because from that child's imagination, an object capable of inspiring millions would be born, the Rubik's Cube. But before reaching that glorious moment, there was a long road to travel. A path made of doubts, resilience, nights of silent dedication, and an unwavering belief that dreams, with patience, always find their way to fit together. And this is where our story begins. The story of a man who taught us that no problem is unsolvable, as long as we have the courage to turn the cube of life one more time. Ernő Rubik's childhood was a testament to resilience. In a country hit by war and undergoing post-war political changes, he learned to grow up without luxuries, but with something more valuable than any wealth: the ability to appreciate what is essential. He didn't have an abundance of toys, but he did have a universe inside his mind, a universe made of pieces, patterns, and infinite possibilities. This austere childhood pushed him to build, to reinvent, to create with the little he had. And from that scarcity, the richness of his imagination was born. Ernő discovered that every obstacle could be transformed into an opportunity to think differently, that adversity, instead of being a wall, could become a springboard to greatness. This is how he began to understand a universal truth. Life, like a puzzle, is never handed to you solved. It always demands dedication, patience, and persistence. Sometimes the pieces seem not to fit, but with each attempt, with each new turn, a way forward appears. This Hungarian boy didn't know it yet, but he was silently sowing the seed of a legacy that would prove to the world that problems, however impossible they seem, always hide a solution waiting to be discovered. And as he grew with that inner spark, destiny began to shape the character of the young Rubik, a character that would soon lead him to a decisive encounter with art, geometry, and invention. Ernő Rubik's youth was the fertile ground where everything he had learned in his childhood germinated. Quiet, reflective, and deeply observant, he didn't seek the limelight in school hallways. His greatness was found elsewhere, in the way he saw the world. Where others saw straight lines, he saw connections. Where others saw shapes, he found hidden patterns. His passion led him to study architecture and design in Budapest. There, geometry ceased to be just a childhood game and became a tool for building ideas. Ernő understood that architecture wasn't only about building structures, it was about giving shape to human dreams. And with every blueprint, every sketch, every calculation, he strengthened the discipline that would accompany him for the rest of his life. At the university, he also faced a decisive challenge: patience. Not everything was immediate. Not everything went well on the first try. Sometimes a design had to be redone. Other times a model would collapse. And with each error, he learned that true greatness is not measured by the speed of triumph, but by the ability to get up again and again. It was during these formative years that Rubik began to ask himself a question that would stay with him forever. How can a human being understand the complexity of the world around them and, at the same time, find beauty in that complexity? That seemingly abstract question would lead him to create an object that would not only challenge the mind, but also inspire the heart. Becoming a professor was the next natural step for Ernő Rubik. He wasn't a common teacher. His mission was not just to transmit knowledge, but to awaken the spark of curiosity in his students. He wanted them to understand that geometry and architecture were not cold formulas on a blackboard, but a living language that could explain the world and, at the same time, beautify it. However, he soon faced a challenge. How could he truly get his students to grasp three-dimensionality? How could he make them feel the connection between space, form, and movement? The answer was not found in books, but in his own ingenuity. Thus, the idea was born for an object that could tangibly show how pieces fit together and transform without losing their internal structure. A model that taught, not just with words, but with the experience of hands and eyes. He wasn't looking to invent a toy. His goal was to create a teaching tool, a bridge between the abstraction of the mind and the reality of space. With patience and dedication, he assembled small cubes that rotated on themselves, connected by a mechanism that seemed impossible. And when he finally held it in his hands, he understood that he had brought something to life that was larger than he had imagined. That object, which he called the magic cube, didn't just teach geometry. It taught resilience, logic, persistence, and above all, it taught that every turn, however chaotic it seemed, could lead one closer to the solution. Destiny was written. That humble cube, created in a modest workshop, would soon conquer the entire world. The magic cube began its journey in silence, within a university classroom in Budapest. For his students, that object was more than a model. It was a challenge that awakened in them a passion for discovery. Every move led them to a new combination, and every mistake was transformed into learning. The cube became a mirror of life, complex, sometimes frustrating, but always full of possibilities. Soon, Rubik's ingenuity couldn't be contained within those walls. The cube attracted attention beyond the university. It was something different, something that blended mathematical rigor with play, education with fun. In 1975, he registered the patent for his invention. He officially named it Buvos Koka, the magic cube. However, the path was not easy. Hungary was still living under a closed regime, and bringing the cube to the world was not a simple task. There were doubts, closed doors, rejections, and obstacles that would have made anyone give up. But Rubik did not relent. With the same patience with which he turned his own invention, he continued to find a way to share it. Finally, in 1980, the cube was presented at international fairs and began its global expansion. It was then that it received the name with which it would go down in history, the Rubik's Cube. No one imagined what was about to happen. What was born as an educational tool would transform into a cultural phenomenon that would cross borders, languages, and generations. The cube was destined to become a universal symbol of ingenuity, persistence, and perseverance. And so, the invention that had been born in a small Hungarian workshop began to conquer the entire planet, piece by piece, turn by turn. the world received the Rubik's Cube with unprecedented astonishment. Suddenly, millions of hands on every continent were turning, trying, failing, and trying again. The cube transformed into a collective challenge, a universal language that needed no translation. In the 80s, its popularity reached unimaginable levels. In schools, offices, and homes, the small puzzle became a symbol of ingenuity and patience. Some saw it as a simple game, others as an impossible challenge. But for everyone, without exception, it represented the struggle between chaos and order, between frustration and perseverance. The most dedicated spent entire hours in front of its 6 colors. Every wrong move was a lesson in humility. Every bit of progress, a personal triumph. Solving the cube wasn't just about aligning pieces. It was proving that with persistence, even the most difficult things could be achieved. Soon, competitions began to emerge, and a community was born that would later be called speed cubing. There, young people from all over the world showed that speed was not only physical, but also mental. Pure concentration, strategy, and resilience. What had started as a teaching tool transformed into a cultural and educational phenomenon. And while the cube conquered hearts, it also inspired minds in fields like mathematics, programming, and even artificial intelligence. Rubik's legacy was beginning to take shape, and with it a clear message. No challenge is too great if faced with patience, discipline, and faith in the process. While the Rubik's Cube became a global phenomenon, its creator remained true to his essence. A simple, reserved man, deeply dedicated to the art of creating and teaching. He didn't seek fame or the spotlight. For him, what was important was not the applause, but the power of an idea that managed to awaken ingenuity and perseverance in millions of people. Erno Rubik was never an aggressive entrepreneur or an inventor obsessed with money. He was, first and foremost, a thinker. He believed that the true value of the cube was not in its sales, but in what it generated in people. Persistence, resilience, motivation, and the joy of discovery. In interviews, he used to repeat that solving the cube was not an act of magic or luck, but the result of patient dedication and continuous effort. And that was the same philosophy he applied to his own life. As an architect and professor, he knew that great achievements never arise from haste, but from persistence. The world saw the cube as a challenge. Rubik saw it as a mirror of life. Because in every turn, a lesson was hidden. Disorder is not permanent, and even in chaos, there is always the possibility of finding harmony. And so, while millions marveled at his invention, he continued to work in silence, convinced that true greatness is not about shining oneself, but about igniting the spark of greatness in others. The Rubik's Cube was not limited to being a pastime. Very soon, its influence transcended game rooms and delved into the deeper realms of human knowledge. Mathematicians began to study it as an enigma of infinite combinations. Programmers took it as a challenge to design algorithms capable of solving it. Artists used it as a symbol of creativity and expression. In every field, the cube demonstrated the same thing, that complexity could be understood and that constant effort always led to a solution. In artificial intelligence labs, engineers developed programs that sought to solve it in the fewest number of moves possible. In classrooms, teachers presented it as an exercise in patience, concentration, and logic. And in art, the cube appeared as a metaphor for the balance between order and chaos. In this way, what was born in a small Hungarian workshop was transformed into a universal tool for learning, inspiring, and creating. Rubik's invention reminded the world that human ingenuity knows no limits when combined with resilience and dedication. Each colored piece became a reminder that life's challenges, however tangled they may seem, are not a wall, but a path. And that with patience, persistence, and vision, one can always find the way out. Thus, the cube ceased to be a simple object to become a living legacy, capable of lighting the flame of motivation in those who dare to turn it one more time. Beyond his famous invention, Erno Rubik became a thinker on creativity and perseverance. He knew that the cube was just a metaphor, a window into something much deeper, the way human beings face life itself. In his reflections, he often spoke of the importance of curiosity. For him, curiosity was the spark that ignited motivation, the first step that pushed us to explore unknown territories. But he also highlighted resilience, because no discovery, no achievement comes without encountering setbacks and frustrations. Rubik understood that the true value of a challenge is not in the final solution, but in the process that transforms the person who faces it. Solving the cube was a triumph, yes, but even greater was the learning that remained in every turn, the patience cultivated, the concentration trained, and the belief that no problem is eternal. With the calmness of a master and the humility of a creator, he repeated that the cube was not a symbol of difficulty, but of hope. Every move, even the one that seems to lead to chaos, is actually an opportunity to move forward. Because in life, as in the cube, constant dedication turns the impossible into achievable. Thus, Rubik's legacy transcended the object. It transformed into a universal message. Dreams are solved just like a puzzle, with persistence, patience, and the courage to try once more. As the years passed, the Rubik's Cube transformed into something more than an individual challenge. It became an intergenerational phenomenon. Grandparents, parents, and children shared it as a bridge between eras, a common challenge that needed no words to be understood. Just turning its pieces was enough for the connection to happen. In any corner of the planet, whether in a living room, a classroom, or an international competition, the cube united people of all ages and cultures. It was a reminder that the search for solutions is part of our human essence, and in that search, the best of us was reflected. The patience of the elders, the curiosity of the young, and the persistence of those who refused to give up. The speed cubing movement, growing larger every day, brought together thousands of enthusiasts who showed that speed was not just about quick hands, but also about a clear mind and disciplined training. There, in front of stopwatches and applause, the cube became a symbol of personal improvement and a living example that greatness does not depend on luck, but on daily dedication. In every corner of the world, Rubik's invention left the same lesson. No matter how tangled the challenge seems, there is always a path to the solution. And that path is walked with resilience, with motivation, and with the certainty that persistence conquers chaos. The cube's legacy transcended beyond competitions and games. It inspired scientists, engineers, artists, and dreamers, becoming a symbol of the human struggle to understand the complex and give meaning to chaos. In laboratories, it was used as a challenge to develop artificial intelligence algorithms, proving that even machines could learn from its logic. In universities, professors incorporated it as a tool to teach mathematics, physics, and problem-solving. And in art, it appeared as a metaphor for creativity, for the union of colors and shapes that build something greater than the sum of its parts. But perhaps the most profound impact of the cube was on the daily lives of millions of people. Solving it became a silent reminder that patience pays off, that a mistake is not a failure, but a necessary step toward victory. Every person who tried it, even if they didn't complete it, carried with them a lesson. Perseverance transforms the impossible into the possible. Rubik didn't just give the world an object, he gave it a practical philosophy, that resilience and persistence are the keys that open the doors to any challenge, and that even when everything seems tangled, one more move, one more action, is all it takes to get closer to the solution. The cube became, in this way, a mirror of the human spirit, always restless, always searching, always willing to try again. In his maturity, Ernő Rubik understood that his invention had surpassed all his expectations. What started as a tool to teach geometry had transformed into a universal symbol of resilience. With humility, he looked back and acknowledged that the true value of the cube was not in itself, but in what it inspired in others. In 2020, he captured many of his reflections in the book Cubed, The Puzzle of Us All. There, he not only spoke of his creative process, but also of life as a gigantic puzzle. For Rubik, every challenge we face is like a cube. At first, it seems impossible, chaotic, with no way out. But with patience, persistence, and the ability to learn from every mistake, we gradually find order. He said that creativity is not a gift reserved for a few, but a tool accessible to everyone, as long as it is cultivated with curiosity and discipline. And he highlighted something essential. Great achievements are not born from a moment of genius, but from sustained dedication, from repeated effort, from the daily decision not to give up. In those pages, Rubik reminded us that life, just like his cube, never hands us all the pieces perfectly aligned. We are the ones who must turn them again and again until we build the destiny we dream of. His voice, serene and profound, did not speak of magic formulas or shortcuts. It spoke of the simplest and most powerful things, persistence and resilience as the engines of human greatness. Ernő Rubik's legacy is not measured in sales figures or speed records, but in the silent transformation of millions of lives. Because every person who has held a cube in their hands has lived a miniature lesson in what life itself means. To try, to fail, to get frustrated, to persist, and ultimately to succeed. His invention became a symbol of hope and motivation. In moments of chaos, the cube reminds us that disorder is not permanent, that there is always a path to balance. In times of doubt, it teaches us that persistence, even if slow, is the most powerful force to achieve the impossible. And in hours of effort, it inspires us to believe that resilience is not just about resisting, but about moving forward even in the midst of difficulty. Rubik, with the serenity of a sage, showed us that life is not about receiving easy solutions, but about having the courage to seek them. That every wrong turn is not a failure, but a lesson. That every attempt brings us a little closer to the goal. And that in the end, the true triumph is not just in solving the cube, but in discovering the greatness that the process of trying awakens within us. Thus, his invention transcends generations and borders, reminding us that the greatest of puzzles, life itself, can also be solved with motivation, patience, and faith in our own path. Today, when we look at the Rubik's Cube, we don't just see a puzzle. We see a reflection of human strength, of that unbreakable ability to get up again and again in the face of adversity. Each of its 6 colored faces is a reminder of the virtues that sustain us, the persistence that drives us, the resilience that lifts us, the patience that guides us, and the dedication that elevates us. Rubik taught us that even in absolute chaos, the possibility of order exists. That when everything seems tangled, the key is not to give up, but to keep trying, turn after turn, until clarity appears. He showed us that great achievements never come overnight, but through daily discipline, a commitment to a purpose, and the belief that every effort, no matter how small, counts. The cube is, in essence, a metaphor for life, a complex challenge that invites us not to fear mistakes, because mistakes are part of the path to victory. And just as in the cube, every move we make in life, however confusing it may seem, brings us closer, if we persevere, to the destiny we dream of. Thus, his legacy is not just an invention, but a beacon that illuminates our own journey. It reminds us that within each of us is a puzzle solver, a creator capable of transforming chaos into harmony and obstacles into opportunities. The Rubik's Cube is not just the invention of one man. It is an eternal symbol of what it means to be human, to face chaos with courage, to turn it over and over until we find meaning, and to never give up in the face of the impossible. Ernő Rubik, with his humility and genius, gave us more than a puzzle. He gave us a life lesson. He taught us that greatness is not found in ease, but in the resilience to endure, in the persistence to insist, and in the dedication to build. Today, every time we hold a cube in our hands, we also hold a mirror to our own struggle. Because life, like that colorful enigma, challenges us to think, to fail, to learn, and to get up. And when we manage to solve it, we understand that the true triumph is not the perfect order on its faces, but the inner journey that transformed us in the process. Rubik's legacy shouts to us with force that no problem is eternal, that no difficulty is final, and that every challenge can be solved if we have the courage to make one more turn. So, as we close this story, let's remember the essential. Each of us holds an invisible cube in our hands, and even if the path becomes tangled, even if it seems impossible, the secret is never to give up. Because in the end, those who persevere discover that chaos always yields to the unwavering will of the human spirit. If you want more content like this, please like and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.